All right, so we're here with Ashley Allen today. How are we doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, doing really great. So, to kind of start this off, it's gonna be a little different because I wanted you to talk about a little bit what you do, like community-wise, like your job and kind of like the organizations you run and all that.
Absolutely. So right now in the community, I guess first starting off, when I moved back here from college, I knew I had a passion for young people, so I started a youth organization called United Now to Ignite Today's Youth. And so with that was doing a lot of conferences. Our main goal was to bring youth together. At first it started off with like people or youth from different churches, but then it grew and we wanted to focus on education as well. So I did that for about 5 years where I kind of united different young leaders across the Quad City community. We hosted these conferences and we're able to really give back to our young people here in the Quad City community. And for me, it kind of led me to figure out what my passion is, which is to work with young people. So I started a position at Augustana College as an admissions counselor, so working with recruiting students from the Chicagoland area. So I did that for about 2 years, working heavily in the Chicagoland, a lot of them from underrepresented populations. And then just recently I took a position on as a student inclusion. I work in the Student Inclusion Diversity Office as the assistant director. So working more on the side of working with our students on a more one-on-one basis, working on programming with students of diverse background.
Yeah. So yeah, you're definitely all about the kids for sure. Like
Absolutely.
They're all your job choices.
Absolutely.
For sure. And also like with all that too, you're also an ordained minister as well, correct?
I am, yes.
Awesome. Is that like, and what's that like? Is that through a certain denomination?
Yes, so I'm part of Apostolic. That's my doctrine. So locally, I go to Pentecostal Church of God, where my grandfather was the pastor. Now my uncle is the pastor now. So we're part of a bigger affiliation called the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. So that's kind of been all that I've known my entire life.
Yeah.
That from that organization.
Okay, so you pretty much grew up in kind of like that organization in that kind of like church setting.
Absolutely.
And all that.
So I think being, I guess not a pastor's kid, but a pastor's grandkid. For me, that was kind of pretty much all that I knew. I have a number of pastors, bishops in my family. My mom is a soloist. My dad played the drums. So that's just growing up. That's just something that that was in me, and even on both sides of my family. So it wasn't until kind of that I went to college is when that kind of transition happened, where I began to, I feel like, find myself as a person and not just, depending on my family's religion and how I grew up.
Yeah, awesome. So like, where did you go to? Did you go to school at Augustana then, or
no? I went to the University of Iowa. I thought I was going to get far away, but I only got 45 minutes away.
That's enough distance, right?
Yeah. So that's where I did my undergrad work. I double majored in journalism and African American studies, and then later on went to get my master's at Upper Iowa University.
Okay, awesome. That's really cool. It's unique to kind of hear that because like I think like with people who grow up in like kind of a certain setting, that also kind of like affects them like through like the choices they have like school wise and all that. So like the fact that you chose like a public school, was there anything like certain, like was there anything like a certain thing about the public school that you chose that like that kind of added or kind of like kind of have like a spirituality that you can confide in or anything like that?
For me, it was really based off of, I would say we're strongly heavily, like my family is strongly heavily in the church, but then also just growing up, I know like my grandfather, my mom is a teacher, my grandmother's a teacher for us, so education was so important for me. Mm-hmm. And so I went to University of Iowa because I thought I was going to do newspaper, but then once I got to Iowa, learning all what journalism, mass communications has to offer, I studied publication design and also news production. I actually got an internship my senior year at a Channel 2 in Cedar Rapids and thought I wanted to do news production. But we all know, like, I feel like growing up and having one aspect of a career that I wanted to do, like, college completely changes that. I would say really what drove me was the education versus my religion when it came to choosing the college.
That's really interesting. Mm-hmm. I like that, like how that was like more of the catalyst than like kind of like what you kind of grew up
right.
Like that's awesome.
Yeah, but I would say I did have some hurdles as a student. University of Iowa being a public school, it would be kind of classified as this party school. And for me, growing up at the church and then going to University of Iowa, and even though it was 45 minutes away, like I experienced some things that I never really experienced growing up. I wouldn't say my parents were super strict, but I just didn't really experience the world when I was in like high school. But when I got to college, I did experience some some worldly things. And so for me, that was something that just kind of changed the trajectory of my life, just in a sense, because I was at this college kind of doing my own thing. I didn't have to check in with my parents, that type of thing. So I would say, I guess, experienced life outside of the church being at Iowa.
You had to kind of like really look. It's like, okay, like this scene, like this isn't my scene. Like, why isn't this my scene? And just kind of like have that like kind of firmness of like, this just isn't who I am. Like just this party culture.
I think being a young adult, you want to experience things because you're friends. You see other people doing it and you never experienced before. So I did experience some of those things. But even when I was in those settings that I know I shouldn't have been in, like you always, because you grew up in the church, because you know that you have a calling on your life, you have that inkling that you're just like, this is not who I am. Like I'm trying to force me to be somebody that I'm not, even though like I know where my place is in God. But I struggled with that my 4 years being at Iowa. So that was something that I battled with a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it kind of led to like kind of like a better kind of authentic holding on to like who you are, like identity wise. So I can imagine, like,
absolutely.
You know,
I think growing up in church, you kind of depend on your parents, your relationship with God, and the people that you're around in the church. But going to Iowa, I felt like even though I did things that were not of God, I think that helped me grow closer to God as I became an adult, because it taught me how to have a relationship with God for myself and not look to my parents to build that relationship for me with God.
Yeah, exactly. No, I love that. It's like we're so bent on like being like cling onto the community in a sense that like kind of like finding like God within our own like context, and like finding out who we are in our own context is like almost like scary and like almost impossible. So that's cool that you kind of went through that. So like with that said too, kind of going on to the next thing with you kind of like being an ordained minister and all that, which I think is like a super awesome thing. My mom is actually an ordained minister as well, and she has a church right down here, like in down to Rock Island. Okay. But kind of like with that, I know there's like this kind of like stigmatism, I guess, for lack of a better term, but kind of like this this idea that and it's based kind of like on kind of like patriarchy too, that like women shouldn't be in that position,
right?
Like and all that. So like with you kind of like being an ordained minister, was there any kind of like pushback or like criticism in any of the spaces that you were in because of that? Or?
I would say I'm blessed because I not had that pushback. Wow. Being called into ministry, first of all, it's a scary thing. So many times I tried to run from it, but every time I tried to run away from it, I feel like I was running closer to it. So I finally accepted my call when it came to that. I would say I'm blessed because I didn't have too much pushback, because like my great grandmother was a pastor. I have a number of women in my family as examples that are in ministry. So for me to kind of accept that call, it wasn't something that was out of the ordinary. But I will say I've been in settings where I've probably been a part of my organization. I'm one of few like youth leaders. I'm a youth leader regionally in our organization, and so there's not as many women leaders. And not saying that it's not because people don't see them as leaders. It's just not as traditional. But I think being a woman minister, even though I feel like there wasn't as much of a struggle for me, I just felt like when you think about ministry, there's certain things that you have to think about as a woman. Like even when you're up preaching, like, oh, what should I wear to make sure I'm not, giving off the wrong vibes, that type of thing. So I think when you're in ministry as a woman, there's so many other layers that come with it. Not saying I just feel like there's so many different layers that come to it when you say that you're a woman and then you're in ministry and then you're a leader. There's just certain things that I felt like I had to navigate through as a minister.
Yeah, like navigate through, like in terms of kind of like being able to like accomplish what, I guess, like if that makes sense. Like,
I would say with me being younger and in this younger generation, just being people, I think this is what kind of I had, I don't want to say pushback back, that I felt like there was some struggles with, is because I have my personal own style. Like I grew up seeing my grandfather like hoop and that type of thing, hollering when they're preaching, but that's not me. I'm more of a teacher. And I have steps that you need, life application, that type of thing. So I'm not like a screamer or a holler. So I felt like not necessarily just my church, but in places that I would go, saying like, I'm not your average apostolic preacher. I'm not going to holler over the place. I'm going to give it to you how God gave me in the style that he wants me to project. So really walking in who I am as a person and who God has called me to be. Yeah, no,
I resonate with that so much. Just because like the church that I go to now, like I get messages at that church and like like for me, like the church that I was a part of before that, like was very about kind of like when you preach or like give a message, you yell,
Right.
You would like get like that authority, like that authority yelling and all that. It's
Yes.
just like that's just not me. Like I rather like just like teach, I guess, in a sense.
Absolutely.
Like I rather just like talk with people as opposed to talk at them.
Yeah.
And like to be able to like know that like people like honor that in a sense. Like that was always like refreshing to me because like I still like am a person like, man, like I rather just like teach. Like
Yeah,
I don't want to yell.
absolutely. I think it took me a while to really understand that like my style isn't less not from God because I don't do like the screaming and hollering, but I really kind of understand is like, you know, some people receive it differently. So some people like the hooping and hollering but may not know what the message was about. But if I know that they're sitting there and listening attentively to me and what God is saying to me through me, then I think maybe that might be received well for other people. So I feel like not really going off the applause of people, but knowing that you are really walking out what God has called you to do, and again doing it in the style that He has given you and not conforming to somebody else's style.
Exactly, just like being confident in like you and just living that you out, which again like to like and kind of like the traditional setting, that's very kind of like it's always like super like anxiety stricken to like do that. Just like, man, like I want to just be myself here, but like a lot of what you do like church wise, like I see is just like you kind of like in a sense gently kind of like challenging that traditionalism, not in a way of like rebellion or anything, but just like allowing people to know that they can be themselves,
right?
And in this certain setting, which is powerful, you know, especially like little girls. Like I like looking at like girls who grow up in church and like see you like being somebody who's just like teaching and doing this in such a different manner.
Right.
And you're a woman, like that says so much like that. Those kids growing up, so like
absolutely. I think everything that I do now that as I'm learning to progress in ministry is that it's not for me, and that I should, because I think sometimes when we start something new, we're very fearful, and like what are people going to say? What are they going to think of me? But now I just look at like, okay, God, I pray to you. I mean, I understand if this is for me, then I know that you're going to protect me from anything that is trying to do me any harm. And recently, I just started a blog, and it's really specifically talking to women, helping them find out who she is as a woman, whether it be in the community, whether it be in the church, whether it be on her job, whether it be in her ministry, and really God laid that on my heart to do because I really wanted to speak to the woman that was trying to find her purpose. It's called She Is Purposeful, like FULL. So really talking to the woman, knowing that she is full of purpose and was created for purpose.
Yeah, because it's easy to believe that even outside the like church context, to believe like it just in the world altogether, to believe like if you're a woman, like you always have this message of that you're less than kind of like a person almost.
Right.
Like even in the most like subtle ways, like when you're being asked like do stuff like and all that. So like being able to have like a blog like that, or just have a message of like you're worth it, and that you can do like whatever like God puts on your heart, you can live in whatever. That's powerful.
Absolutely.
Even kind of like now, like looking at kind of like with adding this kind of like looking at you and like how you work with the youth and all that. Like because like I work as like a paraeducator, and a lot of this that I do like with poetry, writing, spoken word, I do with younger people too, with teaching workshops and all that. So with that, I've had to learn to like adopt a teaching style and almost like a mentoring discipleship style with kids that's doesn't kind of fit again like the traditionalism of like talking down to the kids, saying like you're a terrible kid, your generation's like terrible, and that's just like this doesn't work for me. But like with you, like what kind of like I guess with that said, what kind of spurred you to like start the organization that you did, and like how did it kind of like challenge you to kind of like take your kind of like new like kind of this new thought of like how to work with kids, and how that kind of pushed against the traditionalism, I guess?
Wow. With Unity, that's the acronym of the first organization I started. It really started because I was in a place where I had graduated from college and I was working as a teller at the time. And I was just like, I was frustrated because I'm like, I spent all this money to go to college, expected myself to be in this certain career, and I wasn't there. So it really came out of frustration. I think a lot of times is when we're called to do something, it will come out of frustration. It won't come out of something that looks like, you know, it's supposed to happen. So that's really where it kind of spurred. And I knew I wanted, for me, is like, because I work with a lot of youth and a lot that come from different backgrounds, I want to meet them where they're at. And that's what Unity was really kind of, I felt like there was a need that needed to be met, and where we were in different churches and different organizations, but yet we were divided. I think sometimes when we're a part of a certain church organization, it can divide us rather than and bring us together. So that's really what I wanted to do. And like in the midst of it, being able to create program for young people that didn't just look like traditional. I think sometimes we may go to like churches or church services that aren't catered towards young people. So I wanted to provide something that would be catered to them. I'm not saying I was the only answer out there, but for me, that's what kind of started my passion in knowing like this is truly what I've been called to do. So like fast forward 6 years later, I'm in a college doing programming for students. So I feel like when I look at that, it may not be in the church, but as believers, like when we walk outside of our doors, like we don't have to necessarily preach and teach, but the way we live our life is ministry, and people are going to see something different in you, especially if you're a believer. So whether in the church, whether in the community or at your job, like I really believe that's a reflection of who you can show other people as being a light in this world to other people that may not know Christ or may not even step foot in a church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's awesome. So, last question, like, and it's about the kids again. But like, again, because it's just like with me, just like working with kids, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but like, it's kind of taught me, even though like I'm only 26, like going on 27, but it kind of just taught me just like work with younger kids. It's more, I've learned it's more important to just like listen, you know, listen to the kids, and like whatever my like opinion is, whatever like my, like you should do this or that, like not like pushing it onto the kid, but just more so listening, just being able to be there and listen to the kid, and like out of my listening to them, like being able to show that like I'm here and available, like I get the permission to kind of speak into their lives and all that. So like, how important is it for you, I guess, like being able to listen over, like, have you ever experienced like that? Well, just like that importance of listening over like saying, like how important is that to you?
I think this is kind of cliche, but I heard somebody say, you know, you have 2 ears for a reason and 1 mouth, where you can be able to be attentive and really listen. And I think about that when my walk with God, like I want God to listen to me when I'm frustrated, when I'm happy, when something goes on, like having that communication with him, like he's there to listen to me. And I feel like in that aspect, when you think about children and what they go through a lot of different things. I come in contact with students that go through a lot of different things. And a lot of times the experiences that I never even experienced. And I'm 30 years old. So I'm just like, wow, I can't believe that you have been going through this, but yet you are trying to better yourself and be in higher education, that type of thing. So I'm just being open to listen, and I feel like being there as a support first, and then like being able, if the door's open for you to give your advice. But I think listening is a part of the best type of communication that you can ever do for a young person, because if they know that you're there to listen and not just necessarily give your opinion, but listening first, I think they'll be a little bit more open, and then that's room for you to give your influence or give your advice on whatever it is that they're going through.
Definitely. And like me, you kind of said it too, like sometimes like that giving advice is like not giving advice at all. Sometimes like I've learned like there's times where like, I've just allowed a kid just talk for 45 minutes, just let that happen, and they said like thank you after, because like that's all they needed. So like
I think that's something that you have to learn, because at first you're just like, oh, I want to say something, but I'm like, nope, be quiet, just listen and then go from there. I feel like even in those times that we're listening, God will give you maybe, you know, some things that you can speak to them, to their situation. So I think having that moment where you're listening to them and then also attending to the voice of God, because even though we may be on our jobs, again, like I said, that's our opportunity to be a witness, and not necessarily bringing God into it, but just showing, you know, a reflection of God, of who we are as believers. So listening to the student, but then also being able to listen to God to be able to lead you in your conversation with that student.
Most definitely. Wow, that's we can expand on that. I feel like forever. Definitely. Well, thank you again for this interview, Ashley. It was
amazing. Thank you for the invite. Sure. I really had fun. Enjoyed it. I
appreciate it. It's getting me ready for going back to school and work with kids.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.